Hello and welcome back to this video. Hello and welcome back to this video. So in the previous video, we reviewed what is serverless, right? We saw what's the main differences between serverless and the traditional computing platforms, right? And I hope you understood what serverless is, because in this video, we're going to cover Azure Functions. And as we've been talking, Azure Functions is one of the key serverless offerings in Azure, right? So let's make sure you understood the serverless concepts, and then let's go ahead and study, and let's go ahead and understand what are Azure Functions, right? So first of all, serverless applications platform on Azure, right? So Azure Functions is a platform where you can build serverless applications, right? And that's pretty much we already covered in the previous section, right? So you can use this platform of Azure Functions and Function app basically to build the serverless applications, right? To host your code in the serverless platform, right? And they are naturally scaled. Azure Functions are auto scaled when they are used as a serverless platform. The main reason behind that is you don't have to upfront define your infrastructure. In other words, you don't have to worry about what's the infrastructure like behind your functions, right? That's the headache for the cloud provider, right? They have to be ready to provision infinite amount of infrastructure when you are using their serverless offerings, right? So they are auto scale, they are naturally scalable functions, right? You have 100 users, you pay for 100 users usage of that function. And if you get 100,000 or a million users, right, you don't really have to worry about the infrastructure behind the scenes, because the cloud provider would take care of that for you, right? And because of that, you're only charged for the resources that you use, right? And all of these different cloud providers have different ways of charging, right? But they are pretty much on the same lines. For example, in the Azure, right, you are charged based on how many executions or how long your functions are executed, right? And that's how. And Azure also charges based on the resources used by your function. And if you're using it for any kind of storage, if your function includes any kind of storage, then you are charged for the storage that you've used. If you have a long running functions, right, then you would be charged for that compute cycles used while your functions were executing, right? But if there is no one using that function, then you don't pay for anything, right? So it's as simple as that. You are only charged for what you use. And one of the biggest benefit of using any kind of serverless technologies like Azure Functions is that you can choose the choice of technology, right? You can choose the programming language of your choice and build your code and use this Azure Functions to host your code, right? So you can use any of these, standard programming languages, for example, C# or F# or JavaScript or even Python, right? You can when you're building your functions, it would ask you to choose which language is your function built upon, right? So that's one of the additional benefit of using serverless, right? You don't have to worry about any specifics of the infrastructure, right? So if for example, if you in a traditional computing, you would have to make sure that whatever programming languages you're going to use, there are supporting components already installed on that server, right? If you're using C#, you would want the .NET components to be installed beforehand so that you can execute your C# code. But in the serverless or in Azure Functions, you don't worry about it. You just choose the programming language, and then it takes care of everything else behind the scenes for you, right? And it also supports the package managers, right? Like NuGet and NPM, right? So what it allows you to do is you can still use many of these external libraries, right? To rapidly build your applications in Azure Functions, right? And there are two service plans basically. When you sign up for, when you create these Azure Functions on Azure portal, right, you would be asked to choose from one of these two service plans, right? And there are two. These two are quite different. So the first one is, a standard consumption based service plan, which is serverless. Okay, and Azure also offers you to, if you're going to have a very high usage of your functions, if it's constantly going to be called, you know then you can also define your infrastructure, right? So you can have a virtual machine, then it doesn't remain serverless anymore, right? But still it gives you that additional option. So if you don't want to go serverless option, right, and for some scenarios it might be a very good business case to not use serverless, right? But in general, while we're talking about serverless computing and Azure Function, the consumption plan is what offers you the serverless functionality. So you don't pay anything upfront, you only pay for what you use. And the second alternate that Azure offers is the app service plan. And in the app service plan, you have to actually define your virtual machine and how much storage and how much memory, how much CPU power you need, right? And because it's being virtual machine, you can still, virtually add the processing power or the memory if you need in future. But still, it's an additional step. You have to manage your virtual machine. You have to manage your infrastructure, right? So these are Azure functions. In the next video, right, we're just getting started right now with the Azure function. So in the next video, we're going to build a sample Azure function, right? So what we're going to do is we will see a basic function using C#, and we'll see how you would achieve something in a traditional environment, right, using Visual Studio and write your code. And then with what's the difference, and you would notice the benefit of serverless right away as soon as we complete the normal project and we build a sample Azure function. So stay tuned. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you.